was as carefully chosen as the disciples of Christ. And I will not tolerate stowaways. You will be flogged. And when we put into Cuba to resupply, God willing, you will be flogged some more. And then enslaved on the sugar plantations for the rest of your miserable lives. To the break.
What's up, guys? It's Dave coming from John's office, getting this solve video put together. Hey, besides just walking through the solve, we had the idea of kind of just explaining our thought process too, putting this poem together. So let's start at the beginning. When it's that time of year, early spring, when John and I are trying to figure out where to hide this chest, because we always hide the chest first and then write the poem. We work backwards. Originally, we actually wanted to hide the chest in these mountains just west of Tooele. So for a week or two, we were hiking all up these trails, but a lot of it is more remote than you think. It kind of takes a while to get all the way out here. And then there's a lot of dirt roads. There's gates that are closed depending on the season. So after a week or two, we actually were pushed west and we were looking at these mountains that split, just Salt Lake County and Tooele County. But a lot of this is privately owned, Kennecott, Rio Tinto, and there's some public trails and stuff, but it's a little confusing about what's public and what's private. And so that pushed us south to Utah County because we haven't, showed a lot of love to Utah County with these poem hunts. And we thought it was the perfect opportunity to kind of do what a lot of requests we've gotten over the years is to do the poem in Spanish. And we thought, well, we haven't been anywhere near Spanish Fork before, which is always kind of like the southern border of the boundaries that we release. So we thought it would be a great excuse to do a poem in Spanish. So the fact that it's in Spanish is a clue in and of itself. And I know a lot of you right out of the gate, just because it wasn't Spanish, started looking at Spanish Fork. And we knew you would. And that's kind of when we had the idea of what if the first few lines didn't get you to the trailhead, but actually got you to the right county? All right, so let's just jump right into the poem. This year we wanted to have an epic treasure hunting quote made by a Spanish explorer to start us off. And that's how we came across this quote by Cortes. Si sufres dolor que se cura con oro. Just such an epic quote. Which obviously, we're going to need this information later down in the poem. But to the next line, busca el atajo donde canta el coro. Okay, so this line is pretty much getting us to the Domínguez and Escalante expedition because they were literally looking for a shortcut between Santa Fe, New Mexico and Monterey, California. And the choir, so El Coro, this is referring to the fact that they were priests. And I mean, since the Middle Ages, the priests have sung in choirs, in these cathedrals, in the chancels, for 1,000 years. So the choir is Domínguez and Cortes because they were priests who were looking for a shortcut, which is pretty much Spanish Fork Canyon. They came down Spanish Fork Canyon, which gets us to the next line, encuentra el lugar por el cual se nombra. So this is actually the cross, which I think a lot of you figured out too. This is the Escalante cross that is kind of commemorating their expedition. So if we look at the cross and we read the next line, dale la vuelta y sigue la sombra. So dale la vuelta actually came because I think in all of them, in every single poem hunt that we've had, when we release the boundaries almost always cut off at Spanish Fork. And so, almost 100% of everyone in this treasure hunt lives north of Spanish Fork. So whether you visited the cross virtually or physically, what we're saying is, okay, now turn around and follow the shadow, which points you northwest. So we're looking for a canyon or a trailhead in Utah County, northwest of the Spanish Fork, the Escalante cross, the Spanish Fork, which gets us to the next line. And what we knew that we wanted to have a line in here that was so simple that most people would discard it because of how simple it was.
If you believe Moriarty has you under observation, isn't this a bit conspicuous?
It's so overt, it's covert.
So, ¿dónde aprendes a oler el helado? So where do you learn to smell ice cream? Well, where do you learn anything is at a school. And this quote, to smell ice cream, is directly from the Goonies. So we're learning from the school of the Goonies, which is represented by the letter G on the mountain. In Utah, there are a lot of letters on mountains. I think, there's at least 87. And, you have BYU, Utah, you have all of these high schools. And the story behind Pleasant Grove, actually, in 1920, the principal and the student body, to kind of celebrate their high school, put the G on the mountain. So it's been up there for over 100 years. Okay, so that gets us to the G on the mountain, which gives us a few options. So we have Battle Creek to the south, and we have Grove Creek to the north. So let's look at the next line. O comimos langostos en el pasado. So when we were actually researching the Escalante and Domínguez expedition, one of the first things we saw was that it happened in 1776, which, is an important year for America. And so we were thinking, how do we get from Spanish Fork to a trail somewhere in Utah County? And that's when we thought of this flag that they fly every single year in Grove Creek Canyon. I don't know if it's the biggest flag that flies in America, but it's one of the biggest flags. It's like over a quarter of an acre. It's a few hundred pounds. It's massive. You can see it from the freeway, and they light it up at night. I mean, it's pretty epic. So that line, O comimos langostos en el pasado, where did we eat lobsters in the past? So this is kind of commemorating that in 1776, we declared war on the British for our independence, and we, defeated the lobsterbacks, the British soldiers in the Revolutionary War. This is what it's referring to. Okay. And this gets us onto the actual trail. So, cuando vuelves a mirar el amanecer. Okay, so let's get to the maps. So we're at Grove Creek Canyon, and it's saying when we return to see the sunrise. So, or when we see the sunrise again, so when we face east again. So if we go from the trailhead in Grove Creek Canyon and we head east, we pretty much follow this canyon east up until there's a kind of a sharp switchback, and then it heads west. And we follow this trail all the way west until it turns east again right here. This is where you start your measurement, and you continue straight. In the email, we kind of broke it down. Mira los números como si fueras un cuervo. La edad cuando llegó es lo que observo. Okay, so the word crow has a double meaning, a double translation. You measure the distance on the trail as if you were a crow. Another translation of the word cuervo is priest. So look to the numbers as if you were a priest. And this is probably the most complicated part of the poem. Like a month ago, everyone found out that El is referring to Cortes. I know there's been a lot of kind of speculation about the age of Cortes because, it was his 34th year or 35th year. We're so anal about any information about the poem hunt getting out that it's just the two of us putting this together. And it seemed like the first 3 or 4 sources that we looked at all said that he was 34 years of age when he landed in Mexico. Even AI, which I use a ton, said that he was 34 years old. So, but even with that, a lot of you figured out this clue. Even the podcast guys, Catch Me Outside guys, they sent me a screenshot the morning before we blasted the email out, pretty much figuring out that, okay, this is referring to a scripture in the Old Testament in Numbers that says, okay, we have to go 2,000 cubits. And 1 cubit is 18 inches, so we're looking for 3,000 feet or 914 meters. So from the map, from where this trail turns east again, we mark it and we measure distance down Mahogany Trail for 914 meters. And this last line, ahora está cerca una última pista, muévete al lugar con la mejor vista. So, the view from the treasure is pretty decent, but what this is also saying is you always want to stay up. Because Mahogany Trail has a bunch of little trails that kind of branch off it. I don't know if they're like horseback riding trails, mountain biking trails, deer trails, but you want to just stay on the high trail the whole way. So you follow Mahogany down, and then probably that's most relevant where the trail actually splits. So I think Mahogany goes up this way, but it can also go this way. So look to the best view. So you go up, and you measure 914 meters. Okay, which gets us to about right here. And at 914 meters, you go to the best view about 30 to 50 feet off the trail. And so you climb up this little, it wasn't very steep, but you just climb up here, and right at the top where you kind of get stopped by these trees, there's some shade, and that's right where the treasure was hidden, was right in this little shady spot with the best view. And that's essentially the poem hunt. I'm trying to think what a lot of you may have questions on. As far as this reel goes, we thought it would be fun to kind of switch it up a little bit, just instead of like the boring same kind of format we always use. But we knew that people would kind of dive way deep into this. And so we tried to keep it as simple as we could. Just because even if we release a clue with text, there's just so many different interpretations of it. So essentially what this reel is trying to say, there was 2 main clues in here. There's the obvious one where, okay, we want to make sure everyone knows that Escalante and Domínguez expedition play a pretty important role to the poem. But the other one that was a little more subtle was actually these background pictures. So, the Virgin Mary with Jesus, and then on the other side of our beautiful poker dealer here, we actually have the Last Supper. And so that was kind of when we were pointing everyone, look to the Bible for the distance that you need to measure on the trail. But those were really the only 2 clues for this treasure hunt that we had in there. I hope, like always, everyone had a great time. John and I, we try our best. It's just the 2 of us for these poem hunts. We know there can be some frustration out there with just the heat and some of the clues that we give, but we try our best. So we hope everyone had a great treasure hunt. We're still hoping that we can plan the QR hunt in time for, beginning of October, late September. And yeah, we love all you guys, and we'll see you soon.